want our guests from the schools to know your names, and I want you to know the folks from the schools and what their functions are. So I know this is a pain in the neck, but if everybody could start right here, Matt, go around the room, introduce yourself and the department you're in. Joe?
Joe Byler, Superintendent of Schools.
Great. Joyce?
Joyce Hussein, Maintenance and Operations.
Barbara? Paul?
Paul Schifone, Public Works. Jack Napier, Assistant Chief, Fire Department. Mike Carroll, Fire Chief, Stoughton.
Jonathan?
Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Communication.
Fred?
Fran Rubidi, Town Secretary Officer. Denise Brusco, Public Health and COA.
Chief? Deputy?
Brian Holmes, Deputy Chief.
Reggie Wachikowski, Town Manager's Office. Teresa Cardoso, Treasurer's Office.
Rosa Cedar, Golf Course.
Sean Leahy, Stoughton Board of Health.
Sean?
Lawrence Perry, Town Sanitarian, Engineering, Board of Health.
Trish?
Trish Shropshire, IT.
Bob?
Bob Mullen, Town Moderator.
Sharon?
Sharon Johnson, Veteran Services. Hi, Mary Jean Martin, Interim Auditor Accounting.
Hi, Kevin Smith, intern.
Dee?
Deanna Chatsville, HR, Payroll and Benefits.
Tracy?
Tracy Carrera, HR people.
Steve Frame, Engineering Department.
Chris?
Chris McGee, the Library Director. Bill Roth, Town Planner.
Kelly Johnson, Assistant Town Clerk. Samantha Rigo, Senior Clerk.
Stephanie Carrara, Town Clerk.
Patty Perkins, Assistant Supervisor, Operations Assistant.
Bill Rowe, Town Accountant.
Matt Valentonio, Assistant Superintendent of HR and Wellness.
Well, isn't it amazing how the finance people find themselves the first 2 minutes? They find each other. It's amazing. Steve Cavey?
Steve Gailey, Select Board.
Mark?
Mark Tisdale, Assistant Town Manager, Director of Development Services, Town Mechanic.
And I'm Tom Coulter, Town Manager. I'd like to begin the program by welcoming all the folks from the school system. This is your house. This is the people's house. And so you're always welcome here. And if Joe and I accomplish nothing else in the rest of our careers, it's going to be to tie this organization to the school organization toward common goals, common objectives, common core values. And it's to serve the people of Stoughton to the best of our ability. I'm going to be very brief. Steve Cavey is our host for this morning in welcoming the superintendent to the town of Stoughton. I'd like first of all Mark Tisdale to say a few words. He's more than just the assistant town manager. He's the person that has kept this team together through multiple town managers as our interim. And if it were not for Mark, we wouldn't be starting out with this running start that we're getting right now. He's a big fan of the schools, always has been, a big fan of education. So I'm going to ask Mark to say a few words, then turn it back to me.
Thanks, Tom. For those of you who don't know me, I'm not really good at just shooting from the hip, speaking like he is. So I'll just wing this. I've been here for 13 years. I'm going on my 14th year. I started off as the assistant town engineer, then the town engineer, and then they just started kind of rolling departments underneath me and called me Director of Development Services. I was interim town manager for 2 separate times for about a year each, roughly. Recently, right before Tom came, so I gave him a nice. I found where all the problems were, and then I gave him the package and said, "Solve these." so Yeah, exactly. So no, I love this town. I love working for this town. I've always supported the schools. A lot of the traffic projects actually Joyce and I have worked on together in the past. All the destruction in front of one of your schools is totally because of me. No, that's actually Mass DOT. That's a different story. But no, we've always worked together well. Continue to work together well. Joe's phenomenal, so it's just going to get better. So.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to introduce you to the school folks. Our Vice Chair, Mr. Steve Cavey. For those who work in this town, I know they join me in telling you that he's one of the single most graceful, kind, and thoughtful leaders I've ever been associated with. And I know that my colleagues from Town Hall would agree with that. Steve is just a pleasure to work with. Steve, even during difficult times, with Joe's predecessor, was always the one to try and build bridges in a difficult environment. So Steve and Mark and I have been traveling around town with Joe the last several weeks, again tomorrow, to see all of the schools, to understand all of the issues, to help the superintendent understand some of our challenges, some of the town challenges, and it's been extraordinarily helpful. That was Steve Cavey's idea. He's a lifetime team builder and leader. And with that, Steve is going to introduce our honored guest. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Steve Cavey.
Thank you very much, Tom. So I'm going to start off with a little story first. The first job I got out of college, my college education was in philosophy, and I also majored in philosophy and the history, math, and sciences.
That makes a lot of sense.
I always tell people when I got out of college, I looked through the newspapers, and the philosophy companies weren't hiring. So I had to do something else. So I combed through the newspaper. I found a company, a large company in Boston. I came here, applied for it, and was able to get the job, and was able to make enough to get started in a studio apartment in Boston. Found my way up, and the job was an interesting one. It started around 6 a.m. and went to 3, and we do like sort of cash accounting stuff, and then we pass all of our reports over to another group of people that started later, 10 or 11 o'clock, and they went to like 7. And then they would then leave all their stuff, and we'd pick it up the next morning and start again. The reason I mention this is that the first time I was doing this job, you pick up the things that the people had done the night before, and you just look at it and be like, God, what are they doing over there? What's going on? Like nothing's right, and you best fix it. You go through your day, and then you send off your information. Did that for about a year and a half, and then I moved got promoted to the other side. And it was the same situation. I'd wake up, I'd sort of show up, I'd get the information from the other team, and I'd ask, what are these people doing over there? And this is all messed up, and I'd have to fix it. And I realized early on that the constraints that both of these organizations were working under were different, and everyone was doing the best they could with what they had, and nothing was going to come out perfect. And we relied really to be able to work with each other to make it all work. But nobody ever communicated this to us, and there was a wall that you basically threw your papers over, and they would throw them back. And so there was an odd animosity that really wasn't appropriate. I think we really had to spend a lot of time just kind of understanding that these were other human beings who were doing the best they could under the constraints they had. And I've seen this play out in multiple areas of my life since, and the time I've worked with the select board, I've noticed this often with the relationship that the schools have with the municipality, is that there is sometimes a heat or animosity. It often came from misunderstandings. I think a lot of it's driven by our the laws that we work under. It creates a natural animosity. But if we are able to sort of remember our common humanity, be patient with each other as we deal with the constraints we have, and also charitable and forgiving, and realize that everyone here is actually trying to do the best they can for the citizens of the town, for the students in this town, and they are collectively working very hard. And we have to kind of, when there's a place where we feel, we were treated unjustly, or there's something happened, we've really got to put that aside and say, I really want to understand better, like, how this happened, and actually reach out and have conversations. Sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable, but in my time of doing this, I found that they have always produced wonderful results, where you can actually talk to people, you can air your problems, work through the problems, and everybody ends up in a much better place. And so I'm grateful for the fact that there's always been people from the schools who have been very eager to do exactly the same thing that I'm doing, which is to find common ground, find places where we can work together. And in our new superintendent, I see this in spades. I feel like, especially because he is a product of our schools, he grew up in this town, his relationship with the town, and also with the municipal government. As a former town meeting representative, as a former school board member, he understands the constraints that both organizations are under, better than anybody that we've ever had in that seat. And his eagerness to find common ground, to work for the common good, is second to none. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to be able to work with him, to be able to speak with him, get to know him. And so I'd like to introduce you to our new superintendent, Dr. Joe Baeta, and I want to thank him very much for taking this job and for helping us out.
Thank you very much. First of all, I don't believe in titles. Titles are something that happen in formal places. I'm Joe Baeta. I live at 239 Chemung Street. Stop by anytime. This wasn't supposed to happen. So this is a proud kid coming home. I have a fantastic team in the short time that I've gotten to know them. They know what they're doing. I think like Tom has been doing with you folks, we're trying to rise the ship, if you will, rise the waters, rise the ship. They need some patting on the back. There may be a little bit of post-traumatic stress disorder, and I want them to feel and be supported, and that's my job, is to find the resources. One of the things that I'm really proud of so far that's happened is the collaboration. We're going to have disagreements. You can call the former town manager that I worked with for 10 years. We're going to have disagreements. They happen because of the politics of education, the money, and all the other stuff that happens. But the key has always been, I'm always willing to go out and grab a cup of coffee afterwards, go out to a dinner, as long as the town manager pays, and find ways to communicate, not in the media, not under a rug or in the back room, if you will, but an ability to be able to talk things through. As a resident of the town, I also want the town as a community to do well. And as many of you know, being someone who was raised in the town, and all of what Steve said earlier in terms of being involved, I've always believed that if you work as a team, you get it done. You know, there's always going to be the naysayers. They're always going to be sitting in this audience, and they don't want anything new to happen in the town, or a new idea. And that's always going to happen, and it happens in every community. But I think if you communicate the plan to people, I've been talking about working the plan. We have a plan. We're working the plan. I think that we can do some really, really good things. The school committee is ready, I believe, as Catherine, when she first came on board as the chair, was very clear about communication between the schools and town hall. It was very clearly articulated that we wanted to restart that process in many ways. And one of the things I don't do with my people is micromanage them. I want them to lead. They get paid to lead. Let's let them do their job and work successfully. Relationships with every single department here. We're going to be involved with you folks in one way, shape, or form as much as possible. And one of the things I think we need to do is what we can't find. We can't find teachers. You guys can't find officers, policemen and women, people who want to work at town hall as a clerk, who want to be part of HR. It's very difficult to find quality candidates. And I can tell you right now, in the teaching industry, this is about the employees. I've been saying the employees control the employers. I have people that are walking into our district who have 3 years of experience and want us to pay them like they're at 10 years of experience. And they know they'll get it somewhere, if not in Stoughton. And our job is to find those best candidates for the jobs. I think the last part of it is, one of the things I really don't like to do, can tell you I've never done in my 15 years, and that's stand in front of a town meeting. And I've worked with both representative town meeting and open town meeting. Open town meeting is a very interesting process, so I'm very happy to have a representative town meeting, because you never know who shows up. But what's great about representative town meeting is if you give folks the facts and the information, you'll get what you need, and in order to make it a better community and a better town. Lastly, Stoughton is growing when it comes to enrollment in the school side. Not predicted 5 years ago that we would be where we are. We are currently going to be very close to 600 bilingual students in the district. That'll be an all-time high in the history of the town. That goes back to my immigration days when there was a few hundred of us. And we know that population of students, we want them to read and write in English at the highest level that they can so that they can become part of college or career. And I will end with this. I'm a college and career philosophy. Not everybody needs to go to college to be successful. I'm a product of a dad who's illiterate, reads at the 2nd grade level, and a mom who finished 8th grade and worked in factories and put kids through college. So I have a very strong philosophy about the guys and the gals that are working in the trenches, picking up my trash, right, like they did this morning in the pouring rain. And I just wave at them and say, thanks for doing it, because I don't have to do it, and they're taking it from me. By the way, I have no problem with the new trash rules, just in case you want to know. As a citizen. And I think the other thing, too, is as we collaborate about the projects that we have before us, and there are many, as you know, with a potential new school that's going to go to the citizens of the town, and I think town needs that the schools are going to have to collaborate with and understand is Tom and I have agreed in the school committee, and now at the select board I believe we'll get it as well. We want to take a look at the long-term planning of our facilities in terms of if you close something and you're opening something else, what are we going to do with it? Instead of just leaving it there doing nothing for the next 20 years while we pay ridiculous bills for stuff that we don't need. Do we renovate it and make it into something else for the town? Do we take a look at planning at the same time strategically, fiscally being responsible? Because we do have a growing elderly population as well that we need to support. And I recognize that as a citizen, but I also recognize that as a superintendent. I come from one of the communities in Norton that actually has the fastest rising number of elderly folks or senior citizens in the area. So balancing a school budget with the needs of the community is really, really important. And my goal is to work with Tom, the select board, and of course my bosses, the school committee, and my team in putting forth fiscally responsible and yet moving us in the right direction. So that's my goal. Reach out anytime. Please reach out to my team. They're great. I really appreciate you folks taking the time from your busy day and taking the time. Please know that you're more than welcome to come to meetings like this and support me when I screw up, because there will be screw-ups. There always are. There are things that happen in schools that you just, you could write a book about. So thank you very much, and have a great remainder of the summer.
Welcome. Thanks. Joe, stay up here for a minute if you wouldn't mind. I want to tell you just a funny anecdotal story about mine and Mark and Steve's tour of Joan's school with the superintendent last week. So we went into Joe's 3rd grade class, where he was still in the process of mastering the English language. And he said,
Never mastered it, by the way.
he said, Tom, right inside the door, he says, I sat right here. I said, how do you remember that? He said, from the tiles. He said, you go from the first tile, and then you get down 2 more tiles, that's a 2nd desk, and you get down the 3rd, and that's the 3rd desk, 3 tiles. I said, how do you remember that? He said, because it wasn't fair to us chubby kids.
Mrs. Dexter, you might remember that name, some of you that are in town. Mrs. Dexter made us literally sit exactly. The rows had to be as tight as if you were in the military. Well, big kids like me, it just wasn't fair.
I believe you said chubby.
Yeah, chubby.
Yeah. So while Joe's here, and for the school people, while Mark and I and Bill and others and Steve Cavia here, do you have any questions? In order to incent you to ask questions, as you know, when this is over, we have a department head meeting. So if the questions go too long, we may have to skip the department head meeting. Are there any questions for Joe? Go right ahead.
Joe, do you have any idea about long-term capacity at the high school where it's very tight right now and we need another,
Yeah.
how many more kids and how many, what do you think it's going to be?
So a couple of things. So this is always, I've been involved with the MSBA in 4 different projects. And every time you do the enrollment study, the first thing that we always say on building the project is they will come. And they always do in every single project. There's only been 1 project where that didn't happen. And it actually changed the rules and the regulations from MSBA. And that was Bridgewater Raynham. When Bridgewater Raynham was built, it was built too large. And they had rooms upon rooms that were empty, and MSBA made the change at that time to say, nope, we're going with this enrollment number. We're not projecting out 10 years. Our NESDEC numbers will show that we have a projection. So we're going to be in a bind to see.
Right now, as far as the cafeteria,
Yes, yeah,
the teachers have a split class.
yep.
And they don't want their kids to take that lunch because they don't want to tell them, they don't want to go down and read and make information on their lunch. They can only change it with someone who has the same amount of kids.
Correct.
Or more.
So I can tell you this with no specificity as of yet, but Ms. Miller and I have already had a discussion about the school schedule and how the school schedule is probably going to have to long-term be really looked at in terms of not only those types of issues like the overcrowding in the cafeteria and so on, but what are we doing for career placement with our students that don't want to go to college? What kind of programs are we offering? Southeastern will always be an extension of Stoughton Public Schools. I can't offer 99% of what they do, but there are things we can offer, and we should be looking at that. We started a business technology program in my last district. We had 66 kids involved. These were both college-bound kids and kids not interested in college or maybe just 2-year, but what they were getting was introduction to business classes, introduction to the accounting, and then going down web design, and even TV radio is going to be the next area that we were looking at. So those are going to be some of the things that long-term planning we have to do. The easiest resolution short-term is probably going to be taking a look at what we do and how we change it, and then second, probably looking at a schedule change of some sort, whatever that means. I don't want to talk specifics because I don't have the idea yet. But typically that's what happens. Holbrook Junior Senior High School, I was the principal at, a 1954 building that was falling apart, is the first pre-K to 12 one-building district. And what happened with them is we were told 1,150 students. They're at 1,370 right now and growing. So that's the biggest issue with the MSBA, because, you know, remember we had people saying we're building the Taj Mahal, and we kept saying it's not a Taj Mahal. It's big enough for the quote projected numbers, but our projection numbers are now off. I would anticipate we're going to be very close to 4,000 students over the next 5 to 6 years. So we are definitely going to break 3,700 this year. We have 183 language surveys out right now. If 50% of those kids are in need of services, that's 90 more kids added to the 530 we already have in that program. So we'll break 600. Just this morning, we were talking about how to support literacy and all of the new regulations that are in place, another unfunded mandate for us. Just to give you some general, those are some of the things we're up against. And I'm hoping that Tom and I can, next week we're meeting with the legislative delegation, that we can start saying to them, where's the billionaire's tax going? It's supposed to go to transportation and education. Currently what they've done is they said they're supporting education. They are. Through grants going back to cities, mostly cities, no towns, for the purposes of preschool. Universal preschool is coming. Where are we going to put them? Even if it's half days, where are we going to put the potential? Because, you know, if it's universal, that means the parents aren't paying. That means they get to go at the cost to the operating budget. Another problem that we are going to have to deal with in the future. So roundabout answer, but we are aware of the issue. It's the first thing we discussed.
That's the beauty of this collaboration. As Joe said, next week we've got our legislative delegation, congressmen, state senator, state reps, coming here for a similar type meet and greet. We'll meet first in my office to ask tough questions like that. Where's the millionaire tax going? It was designed, it was mandated for education. Where is it going? And is it going to replace existing funding? Because as you may have read on Friday, the state just finished their budget in the first month. They're $600 million under projection. Not a good issue not a good start to their projection issues. But we're going to get these folks in the room, and we're going to hold them accountable to treat Stoughton like they treat our cities. How many overrides do you think the city of Boston has had since Proposition 2.5 passed? Any ideas? The answer is 0, because they get so much state funding, as does Lawrence, as does Lowell, as does most of Worcester, most of the major metropolitan areas. Our demographics justify us getting funding. And with Joe and I going up and plowing through the halls of the State House, we're going to make sure that the town of Stoughton gets its due.
And I think Tom and I just talked about this the other day so that you can see what we're trying to do. We know that there are 6 families moving into town as part of this whole Governor Healy move to take in folks that are homeless, right? We know that they're coming. right? Now, we don't know how many of them are going to be school-age children. We don't have that information yet, and we're not provided that information until they walk into the registration office. They're not going to say it's 6 families with 12 kids. They're just going to say 6 families, and then all of us in this room, regardless of what we do, are going to be supporting those 6 families in some way, because that's the business that we're in. My concern that I have is when this happened last time was when we had the situation in Puerto Rico. And what we were asked to do, and actually Florida before that, is we were asked to allow those students to transfer into our schools, to live in our communities, and with it came some subsidy money during the school year to support the transition of those families, both through Health and Human Services as well as education. That's going to be one of my questions is, those families are not budgeted for. Then we have no way to project out unless you bloat a line item somewhere, and that's never going to be looked upon in a good way. So you go with what you know. That's another, and again, it's 6 families, but they're going to be hitting our human services capital in the community and education services throughout the town in some way, shape, or form.
So just to follow up on that meeting, if you're available, we're going to start off the business side in my office, where we get to be very direct, very open to our legislators, to the point where it may be a little aggressive, and that's why we're doing that in a small group. If you're free, the legislators are going to come out of my office afterwards, and Reggie's got the details as to what time, what day. If you can join us for the reception just like this, it won't be a Q&A, but each of the legislators will address, will give remarks on the issues that Joe and I and Mark and others raised to those legislators. So perhaps you can put them under the gun as well on funding and unfunded mandates and the like. So if you're available, Reggie, what time is that and what day?
It's 9 to 9:30 is in your office, and then 9:30 on will be out here.
Publicly, and where it'll be another meet and greet just like this. Please come, say hello to your congressman, say hello to your state delegation. They'll need to, they'll need some affection after we're done with them. So if you can come and say hello to them, that would be wonderful.
I just wanted to thank Steve. Thank you so much for reaching out on behalf of the Select Board. But my colleagues on the Select Board, Lou and I met the other day, and then I've been touching phone tag with some of the other members. But it's something that I hope we can have some meetings between the school committee and the Select Board as joint meetings around issues before they become critical public relations messes for both the school committee and the Select Board. And one of the ways to do that is to take the chair and the vice chair of each of them, and let's plan on meeting together every once in a while. It's not a public meeting. We're not doing anything crazy, but we are going to communicate about priorities before they become a public relations mess because of different opinions and all of that. Yeah.
So a question,
That's your second one, I thought it was one only, and the meeting was over. Right. So when you look at activities, transportation, and athletics, last November, the school budget, which was part of the special town meeting, I believe, began the process of putting that into operational. We need to get rid of the word free for a minute. It's in the operational budget. There's an increase. So I don't know if it was broken down in terms of town size. I believe it was Chapter 70, and I know that last year's Chapter 70 increase significant was Student Opportunity Act, where this year we received $1,336 per student as part of the SOA. We anticipate there'll be a few more years of that coming. Now, I'm going to give you the opposite of that. I came from Norton, where we got $60 per student, and my total increase was $120,000 versus $4 million or $2 million or 2.9, and all the other numbers that Stoughton's had. So the Student Opportunity Act funds basically has taken Stoughton, and I shared this with Tom the other day, it's basically put us in the top 18 per student expenditure of increase in the SOA, the $1,300 I've talked about. The only other city, the only local community that was there was actually Avon, Little Avon. because again, their demographics are completely changing as well. So the SOA money that's coming in is all targeted in high needs. I believe there are a number of categories, and I believe we're at 11 now, category 11, which gets us that high amount. So we're just below the Lowells, the Lawrences, and so on and so forth in terms of the high needs. Free and reduced lunch is being taken care of by about $168 million in the state budget. And the idea behind that is let's stop this questioning of who takes it for free and who doesn't, and the dynamics that goes with that I think all of us as parents would hate to see with any kid. It came through COVID. It's a response coming out of COVID and the successes that almost every school system had in feeding not only their students, but the elderly community and those in need. And so it's a political win-win for the state. The Chapter 70 allocations for Stoughton will probably continue to go up in terms of the high needs population, specifically the targeting of ELL and special education, and then the high needs in general. We're at 54% right now and climbing. That will probably take us to another category within the SOA money. Now, eventually, SOA money is not going to be there. It's a 6-year program of taking communities and bringing them up to date based upon their high needs. The problem with it is we're all going through a projection of high needs that took place 5 years ago. And now we're using our real numbers. And so you got towns, I know one local city, $22 million increase in one fiscal year in SOA money. And then you have communities like Norton, where I came from, where we're not a high needs district, and you get $60 per student. 60, $1,200, $120,000 total. So everything goes to the town side to support the schools, not to Chapter 70. Chapter 70 went up $120,000. So everything has to go back. So this past year, I cut $1.6 million as I was going out the door. Probably the worst thing I've done in 10 years. We slammed and cut everything, and we feed the heck out of everything. Again, different demographic, but the fact of the matter is, pay now, pay later, somebody's going to pay for it.
I want to give you one brief example of how this level of collaboration will serve the town and the citizens of this town. As everyone in this room knows, from the school side and from the town side, we had a major crisis with our health insurance program. We didn't have that money to pay the $2 million liability that the schools in the town had accumulated with this deficit for teachers and for town employees. It was the schools that came to our rescue and gave us, allocated to us almost $2 million in Chapter 70 money to pay that obligation. That's the type of great stuff that can come out of working collaboratively between the two sides.
And I'll end with the way I've always run my budget through the school committee is I've said if we need a new position, I have to have discussions with the town side about healthcare costs. I can't just have it show up. So if I'm hiring 5 people and our healthcare plan is $20,000 for a family plan, Tom and I have got to talk about that $100,000 and where it's coming from. Right? It's real money. And it has a real effect. And so when you do those types of things, it's usually easier to find the money than when you're just being told I'm hiring 10 more positions, it's going to cost $200,000 on the town side for municipal costs in terms of the health care. So I know the school committee, and there was a lot of discussion, so through Catherine and the former school committee members that were there at the time and the current, the fact is it was the right thing to do at the time based upon, I think, a lot of years of hiccups that needed to be fixed, and hopefully it's somewhat fixed and it gets better fixed.
Are there any other questions for the superintendent? I'd like to formally welcome Select Board Member Lou Gito. Lou, thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. All right, folks.
No department meeting, right?
No department meeting. All I'd ask is that everybody update their website pages and everybody make sure any FY23 bills are in the process. How's that for a brief meeting? Thank you all for coming. I hope you come back for the legislative breakfast. Thank you.
Grab some muffins for the...